Hello everyone, I have for you another color and chat video. This time the topic is not about crafting, it is connected to true crime. I'm going to be talking about the trial of Karen Reed. If you want to go right into it, there are chapters in the description. But I want to first quickly talk about the coloring. This is the coloring what I'm going to do. I found this beautiful image of hydrangea and either peony or rose or both. I'm not 100% sure, but I love it. This image is from the website freepik.com and is completely for free. I will leave the link to it in the description. I printed the image onto a watercolor cardstock, the Canson XL. You can also print onto a printer paper and transfer it. I will leave the link to my tutorial in the description. For the coloring, I used watercolors and coloring pencils. I really like the idea to do a light base layer with watercolors, and then I used coloring pencils for the details and adding depth to the image. More information about the coloring will be in the corresponding blog post. And if you have any questions, just ask in the comments. But now let's hop over to the chat portion of this video. If you're not into coloring, you can listen to this as a podcast. As I said, I will be talking about the trial of Karen Reed, who was accused of killing her boyfriend, John O'Keefe. This is a recent trial that concluded last month. I watched every single day. This is a very interesting case. Let me know if you heard about it or if this is completely new to you. I'm going to start with a summary of the case, as I do not expect everybody to know about this trial or the overall case. I only know about it because I watch lawyers on YouTube and all of them were streaming the trial. In early hours of January 29, 2022, Boston police officer John O'Keefe was found dead in a pile of snow outside of a house of another police officer in a small town called Canton, which is located outside of Boston in Massachusetts. As I mentioned, John O'Keefe was a Boston police officer. At the time of his death, he was 46. He was also raising his niece and nephew after his sister and her husband died just months apart. Karen was 42 at that time. She was a financial analyst and a professor at the Bentley University, and she and John were together for 2 years. But they did not live together. Karen had her own place. The previous evening, on the 28th, John O'Keefe went out drinking with friends, including his girlfriend, Karen Reed. They were all drinking, and according to the investigators, Karen had 9 drinks, vodka sodas, I believe, including a few shots. After the bars closed, they were invited to go to a house of Brian Albert to continue the party. He drove there with Karen Reed, who was driving her SUV. This house was the house where he was found dead on the front lawn at the edge of the property. He was found hours later by Karen Reed and 2 other women, Jen McCabe and Carrie Roberts, who joined Karen to look for John as he did not return home that night. A snowstorm hit the town on the day and it was worsening throughout the morning. But from what I've seen from the testimony, it was over by mid to late afternoon. The snowstorm will play a role in this case. 3 days after John O'Keefe was found dead, Karen Reed was arrested. The prosecution says she hit him with her SUV while driving drunk and leaving him there to die. She was charged with second-degree murder, motor vehicle manslaughter while driving under the influence, and leaving the scene of deadly crash. The second-degree murder was added a few months later, and she pleaded not guilty. So, what's the prosecution theory about what happened? They claim that Karen Reed and John O'Keefe had a rough relationship and were arguing on a regular basis. They had a huge argument in Aruba. They went there on New Year's Eve for holidays, and Karen accused John of kissing other women, and she also caused a scene. In January, Karen Reed was also flirting, texting with another man, Brian Higgins, who happened to be in that house that evening as well. On the day of 28th of January, there were text messages where Karen and John argued, And the prosecution says that the argument continued in the car as they were driving to the Alberts' house. The prosecution says John got out of the car and in a drunken rage, Karen decided intentionally to run him over and leave him there to die. They say that John O'Keefe was struck by the SUV reversing going 24 miles per hour, which is 40 kilometers per hour, for about 62 feet, which is about 18 meters. The right rear of the car struck John and he was projected forward to the left. He was struck into his arm and this shattered the car's taillight, and pieces of the taillight were found on the scene. His body was found about 10 feet 3 meters from the curb in the front of the yard of the house. The cause of death, as stated by the medical examiner, was blunt force trauma to the back of his head combined with hypothermia. The prosecution also questions the behavior of Karen Reed afterwards. She was leaving John nasty voice messages. When she returned to his house with the woman that helped her to look for him, she didn't take her shoes off. Apparently, John O'Keefe was sort of a neat freak, and taking the shoes off was a must. And Karen Reed, by disregarding this, they say this was because she knew he was dead. Also, Karen was heard shouting, "I hit him, I hit him, I hit him," in front of the first responders on the scene. That's what prosecution says about what happened. I believe I pointed out all the main things. So, what's the problem? They found her car taillight at the scene. She said she hit him. Case closed, right? Well, the defense begs to differ. So let's see what the defense has to say. Obviously, they say she is not guilty. However, they also say, and these were the first words in their opening statements at the trial. Her lawyer started with these words: Karen Reed was framed. Continuing with, her car did not strike John O'Keefe, she did not cause his death, and that means someone else did it. The defense believes John died inside of the house. They say that at that house lived a well-known and well-connected law enforcement family in Canton, the Alberts. The Alberts had a close connection to the investigators. Brian Albert, the owner of the house, is a Boston police officer, and his brother is actually a detective at the Canton Police Department. The Boston police recused themselves from this investigation, and so did the Canton police. However, the Canton police was still somehow lurking around. Furthermore, Trooper Proctor, who was the lead investigator in this case, is also a friend with the family. The defense claims that John made it into the house and something happened inside, some kind of altercation which caused his death. They did not imply it was on purpose, this was an accident. In addition to the blunt force trauma to the back of the head that I mentioned earlier, John also had abrasions, scratches on his arm, which the defense says they were caused by a dog, more specifically the family's German Shepherd, who subsequently was rehomed, got rid of by the family, or as they say, they rehomed it. And they actually said the word "it" when they were talking about their dog, whose name was, by the way, Chloe. A few months later, the Alberts also sold the house, and before that, they redid the flooring in the basement. That's where the defense says John was attacked. Brian Albert, the owner of the house, also got rid of his mobile phone, and this was a day before he got the court order to provide it. The same happened with Brian Higgins. He was an ATF agent. As I said, he was in the house that night. He's the one that was exchanging flirty messages with Karen. He actually went to extremes to get rid of his phone. He went to a military base to discard it. The defense also said that Jen McCabe, who is the sister-in-law to Brian Albert and was also at the party in the house, she was actually the one who invited Karen. Her phone was extracted, and they found that she was searching at 2:27 that night how long to die in the cold. And this search was deleted afterwards. Very suspicious, but this one I'm skeptical about just because of technology and technology doing weird things. Her explanation was she was searching this later in that morning on the request of Karen. But what is very interesting, as John was lying in the snow in the front lawn of that house, none of the Alberts managed to put a foot out. They say John was their friend, and the police officer Brian Albert, who is also an EMT, did not step outside of the house. On top of everything, the lead investigator, Trooper Proctor, the defense was able to get an extraction of his personal mobile phone. From that extraction, they found the following. He shared information about an ongoing investigation with his friends and family. He said to his friends who asked if the homeowner where John was found will catch a lot of grief. And his response was, nope, the homeowner is a Boston cop too. He dehumanized Karen Reed. He called her vile names, made comments about her medical condition to his friends. He told his friends and supervisors that he did not find her naked photos yet, as he was going through her phone. And in one of the text messages, he said to his sister, he wishes that Karen Reed killed herself. It also came out that not even 24 hours came by while he did not visit the crime scene yet. He already knew that Karen Reed was guilty. Besides Proctor's questionable and biased behavior as an investigator, the defense says that the investigation itself was also biased and faulty, and that the police did not do a proper investigation of this case. For example, they did not secure the crime scene, there are problems in the chain of custody, and they did not search the house in front of which John was found dead. There is more I could fit into what the defense said. This was mainly based on what was said at the beginning of the trial. The main thing is the defense believes that the police were protecting the people in the house and framed Karen Reed. If you would like to see more without actually watching the full trial, Legal Bites and Lawyer You Know made videos with summaries of every single day of the trial. I will leave the links to those in the description. So, did the prosecution prove that Karen Reed is guilty beyond reasonable doubt? Is there anything believable about the theory of the defense? The trial is over, so what was the verdict? Before I get to the end result of this trial and what would be my verdict and my thoughts behind it, let me first point out one very important thing. The defense was using what is called third-party culprit defense, meaning that someone else did the crime. Many people put a lot of emphasis on this, especially if you combine it with police corruption or cover-up. Like, this cannot happen. The role of the defense is to challenge the prosecution's evidence. They are allowed to introduce alternative as long as it's feasible. The alternative is just an option for the jurors to consider. The defense doesn't have to prove it. This is not about proving the alternative, and you can completely disregard it if you want. There is nothing like you have to choose either Karen did it or the others did it. Only the prosecution has the burden of proof, and the only question is if Karen Reed killed John O'Keefe, nothing else. Alright, so what was the verdict? After 31 days of trial, span over 2 months with over 60 witnesses, we ended up with a hung jury. A mistrial was declared and the jury was dismissed. So we have no answers, guilty or innocent. The prosecution pretty much immediately said they are going to retry. However, after the trial, multiple jurors contacted the defense lawyers and said that they actually all agreed that Karen Reed was not guilty on count 1, the second-degree murder, and count 3, leaving the scene of an accident. They only had trouble deciding on count 2, which had multiple charges. They just did not fill the verdict forms, and if you hear the instructions of the judge, you would know why. And this can be a problem because of double jeopardy. At this moment, there is no solution to this, but there is going to be a hearing in 2 weeks' time, so we'll see what happens. So, what do I think? What would be my verdict? And if you watch the trial, let me know in the comments what would be your verdict or any other thoughts you might have. I didn't know anything about this case prior to the trial. I only watched the trial every single day, which was also one of the reasons why sometimes I did not upload a video. So, after listening to what the prosecution had to say, all of their witnesses and experts, my conclusion is that I do not believe that John O'Keefe was hit by a car. Not just Karen's car, any car. I just do not see any logical evidence that he was hit by a car. Why do I think that? Looking at his injuries, they just do not look like injuries created by being hit by an SUV. And the damage on the SUV doesn't make any sense either. It didn't make any sense from the start, but the prosecution experts, the reconstruction guy, and especially the medical examiner were the ones that actually confirmed to me that there was no car crash. I would actually recommend to watch the testimony of the reconstruction guy for the prosecution, Trooper Paul. Not because of his high expertise, but the lack thereof. This was very hard to watch, especially when he was questioned by the defense. Trooper Paul was just embarrassing. He was no expert on accident reconstruction. He has no degrees, he only did some courses about the relevant issues. It should have been possible to explain this case through accident reconstruction. It involves physics, mathematics, bioengineering, and so on. It really felt that this trooper was trying to fit the prosecution theory into something that could not be fitted. You cannot cheat or bend science, and overall just simple logic as well. Mind you that the prosecution's theory is that Karen drove in reverse at 24 miles per hour, 40 kilometers per hour, while drunk at night on a wet, if not snowy road that was also slightly curved, and managed to hit her target. Only John Arms was hit by the taillight. And yet, somehow, this also managed to project him forward to the left 10 feet, 3 meters into the yard. The prosecution also says his arm shattered the taillight. Was John the Terminator? No way a human arm can do that. You really need to do mental gymnastics in order to make the prosecution's theory fit. The thing is, there was no testing done by this trooper to show if this theory is feasible. How easy is to reach that speed while going backwards? Also, when John got out of the car, was he just standing there and waiting? So many questions and no answers. Unless this did not happen. The prosecution should not have money problem. They should be able to bring the best of the best. So I wonder if the best of the best just would not go with the state's theory. If you watch the testimony of Trooper Paul, I would also recommend to watch Dr. Wolf and Dr. Rentschler, who testified for the defense, to see actual professionals. And the defense did not even have the option to talk and prep these witnesses, as they were not hired by them. Anyways, my number one witness in this case, combined with the other witnesses, was the medical examiner for the state. I already mentioned the cause of death, so I'm not going to go through that again. The medical examiner also determines the manner of death, which describes the way in which death occurred. There are 5 classifications for manner of death: natural, accidental, homicide, suicide, and undetermined. And the medical examiner in this case classified the manner of death as undetermined, meaning that there was not enough evidence to reach a conclusion or there were more than one options. This was huge for me because she also said that they also reviewed the police report. Every case they receive comes with a police report. And if they need more information, they will contact the investigators. This happened in this case. The medical examiner spoke to the lead investigator, but still did not get enough information to determine the manner of death. They have 3 months to do that, and yet she did not change it. Which means that the information she received from the detectives was not enough and did not change her opinion. Let's not forget that the lead investigator, Trooper Proctor, within less than 24 hours, without even going to the location where John O'Keefe died, concluded that this was a car collision and that Karen did it. The investigators only focused on the car collision, nothing else. And this did not convince the medical examiner. You could say that the medical examiner could have just been undecided if it is an accident or homicide. And at the trial, she said that it could have been a car accident that killed John O'Keefe. She actually said it was likely and unlikely at the same time. But she also said that it could have been other things that the lawyers listed. She also said that there were no significant injuries from the neck down, which you would expect in a car collision with a pedestrian. From the neck down, excluding the scratches on his arm and broken ribs, which were most likely caused by CPR, he had no broken bones or fractures, not even bruising. And you would expect at least bruising if there was a car collision. That means she wasn't just undecided about accident and homicide, she was not convinced that a car caused his injuries. And she actually mentioned that some injuries on him were consistent with a fight. So, together with the experts' testimonies on the prosecutions as well as on the defense side, and just a simple logic, I don't see any evidence that John O'Keefe was struck by a car. If you have any other logical explanation, let me know in the comments. There are many people who concentrate on Karen's behavior. I'm not saying that it is irrelevant and it cannot play a role, but the most important part is the physical evidence and if the crime was investigated properly. And I actually don't see anything incriminating in her behavior. Even the so-called confession where she was screaming, "I hit him, I hit him, I hit him." To me, this is pretty lame. This is not a confession, especially when Karen was described as frantic and hysterical. Plus, no one even questioned what the heck she means. Also, those words, "I hit him," are disputed. Carrie Roberts, who was with Karen at the scene, didn't say at all she said those words. She said Karen was screaming, "Did I hit him? Could I have hit him?" And she was asking if he's dead. And Jen McCabe never mentioned it until she was questioned at the federal grand jury. I would actually recommend you to watch Jen McCabe trial testimony as well as Carrie Roberts. Carrie is just for comparison. Brian Albert, Brian Higgins, and Trooper Proctor I would also recommend to watch, especially the cross-examination by the defense. And when you watch these, we can talk about questionable behavior and actions. To be honest, out of all these people, Karen's behavior was the least suspicious and questionable. And if she did what these people did, people would hold it against her. The broken taillight is suspicious, but it can be also explained. Not how it got to the scene, but how it got broken. There is a video when she was reversing, leaving John's house when she was going to look for him, and she bumps into his car. And there were witnesses who saw it and said it was cracked and a piece was missing. They did not say the whole section was missing. And when the troopers went to pick up her car, they did not take any pictures. They did take photos of the broken taillight when they found it on the lawn in front of the house, but no pictures of the car, which is the number one evidence? Why? Why not? I also find it incredible that the police did not search the house, even if the people did not have anything to do with his death. They say they did not have any probable cause, which I would agree if he was some rando who dropped dead on the lawn. But here he was friends with the people in the house, and more importantly, the house was his destination. And the only people who said he wasn't in the house were the people in the house. To me, not really reliable. What I see here, they just did not want to search the house. This would require a police officer to investigate another police officer, who had also relations of sorts with the investigators. So they just rather ignored it or looked the other way. Of course, this is just my opinion. Alright, the coloring is done, so I will finish here. I've been talking way too long. Let me know what you think about the topic. There are many things that I still left out, like talking about the alternative theory, the conspiracy, and also the really bad investigation. You would think that they were investigating death of some random thug that nobody cares about, and not the death of a police officer. And I didn't even mention that the FBI is involved. If you would like to have more information about the coloring, hop over to my blog. I also made a card which you can see here. This is a different image. There were 3 images in the same file, but I colored it in the same way. I had a weekend filled with a lot of coloring. I hope you enjoyed this video, either the coloring or the topic or both. It was pretty long, but I didn't want to make multiple parts. Maybe in the future I will make another video if there are some updates, and I will add what I left out. So if you lasted until the end, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in my next video.